And we're going. Hi, everyone. It's David Newton from Ahead of the Game with Rick and David. Hello, Rick.
G'day, Dave.
How you doing, mate? And hi, Menno, our wonderful guest.
Our special guest.
Yes.
Hello, Rick. Hello, David. And hello, everybody who is joining. Thanks for having me.
Very glad to have you along. And today we'll be covering some very interesting facts and stories from your history. So, Menno, I was just wanting to ask you, tell us a bit about how things were that got you going there, because I remember meeting you way back when you were doing the cash flow game. We met for a cup of coffee, and you were doing some exciting stuff then. Tell me how all that started.
Oh, so I got into Rich Dad Poor Dad when I was still at university. That was the first time I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, and I knew that I wanted to learn more about it. And some people take a direct route. They figure out what they want to do immediately. Some people have to experience 100,000 different things before they figure out what they want to do. It gives you some really great experiences. It makes for a perhaps more interesting but experiential life. And so I've done many different things. So I started off by running a cash flow club while I had my cafe. And
cafe. Oh, okay.
Yes. So I studied hospitality management, and I thought hotels, they probably cost a couple of $1 million. So I don't have a couple of $1 million. I'll start with the cafe. And that was a lot of fun until my landlord decided that they didn't want a cafe there anymore. And I started looking for other locations, and things just weren't aligning. I think the universe was saying it's time to not be in the cafe business anymore. So I made my peace with that, and I moved on, and I started looking at some other things. I started business coaching. But I suppose when life gives you a setback, you really want to be able to get back up on that horse. Some people quit. I was one of those people that said, I want to keep going. I want to figure this out no matter what. And so I went through a bit of a down period, but I kept at it regardless. And I started business coaching. I started doing a couple of other things. And then eventually, in order to be able to facilitate my business coaching business, I started hiring VAs, virtual assistants from the Philippines, in order to be able to support my business. And that's when things started to turn around.
So in order to support your business, you had to hire some people from somewhere, and this was the virtual assistant twist that happened. So how did you see that as being a business then?
So when I still had the cafe, I read 4-Hour Workweek, and I was very excited about that. And I always knew that I wanted to implement what I learned from the book. So special tip, there's no point to reading a book and then not implementing what it says. So I love taking a book and dissecting it immediately. I like to teach people what I read in a book. I like to then implement, see what works, what doesn't work, how it feels with me, and improve from there. So that was very important to me. So I got my first virtual assistant from the Philippines, and they were horrible. I didn't know what to do with them. I didn't know what tasks to give them. I didn't really know how to check up on them and make sure that they were actually getting the work done. So some people see that as a failure. I see that as a great learning experience to be able to grow. So it wasn't the best of experiences, but I learned so much from that process that I said, okay, I've fallen off the horse again. I'm going to get back up on the horse. And I hired a second virtual assistant. And again, it wasn't perfect yet. But again, I learned some new skills by having a virtual assistant who was not the greatest. And I said, okay, so this is still not where I want to be. I went to a seminar where somebody taught me how to actually get a better result from my virtual assistant. So more learning, which I always love. And then I said, okay, third time lucky, I'm going to get myself another virtual assistant. This time I'm going to take all the learnings from all of those years, and I'm going to see if I can get it right this time. If I would have failed again and again and again, I would have kept going anyway. I knew that this was always something that was going to be important to me because, again, another very important secret is that you cannot do anything on your own. So if you have people around you to support you, whether that's virtual assistants, whether it is local staff, whether it is mentors, friends, anybody who has something that you want to achieve that they have figured out how to achieve, you want to surround yourself with those people. And so I knew that virtual assistants were going to be an answer for me.
Just to plug in here, what do you actually get these virtual assistants to actually do for you that you couldn't do for yourself? Can you give us an example or laundry list of what they do?
No, absolutely. So when I was running the business myself, I was doing the marketing, I was doing the sales, I was doing the events, I was doing the admin, I was doing the I was doing everything. So the challenge with that is that I'm running to the ocean, fishing, and then I'm bringing the fish back, and nobody's fishing while I'm then doing all the other things.
So the metaphor, because we know you're not a fisherman
yet. So when you're doing too many different things, then you're going to be hindered from being able to grow. So I always knew that if I was going to continue doing it by myself, that the marketing was going to be suffering if I was working on the sales. My marketing was going to be suffering if I'm doing too much admin work. So I always knew that it was going to be very important to have people around me that can do some of the tasks that are not, well, that I'm not so good at, or that they can do better than me, or tasks that I absolutely dislike.
Because so you have to do the marketing and some of these other admin tasks or sales tasks, or is that the sort of thing that they're currently doing for you?
So at the moment, they are doing my calendar management, and I have never double booked myself since I've had them. They do my email, they do my social media. I haven't been on social media in about 8 months. They look after my videos, they edit my videos, they are very good at dealing with client complaints, and they do that better than I do, for example. They're much more polite sometimes. They make sure that I don't get myself into trouble. And so many more different things that I don't even realize. At one stage, we were working with a spa, and without me even asking them, I just told them we were going to be working with the spa, and they said, we've done a competitor analysis for you because we figured out that you'd need that. So here's a competitor analysis for you because we thought you'd do it anyhow.
So what do you think, Rick? What would you like to ask?
Well, I tell you what I'm thinking. I'd like to meet that horse. When you said you got back up on that horse, it's done pretty well. Let me ask you something. Now that you've got them doing work for you, I'm going to guess over a period of time, people would have said to you, wow, that sounds like a great idea. Can you get me one as well? And can you get them to work for me as well? I'm sure that's come up. And I'm wondering whether you've crossed your mind and said, well, maybe I can rent these people out, or I have a resource here that I can be a reseller of this resource.
Absolutely. And that is exactly how it turned into a virtual assistant agency. People started seeing what I was doing and how much free time I had, how much work the virtual assistants were doing for me. They noticed that I wasn't double booking myself anymore and calling them and saying, look, I'm not going to be able to make the meeting because I actually booked that same time with somebody else. I was notorious for that. My virtual assistants make sure that that doesn't happen. And so as people started asking, I noticed that it was something that people needed. And I had the resource because I already had 2 virtual assistants by that stage. And they started connecting me with other people in the community and said that they would love to be able to employ some other people in their community in order to be able to help them as well. And that's how it all started.
Okay.
Okay. Have you taken virtual assistants from other countries or only in the Philippines?
So currently only from the Philippines, because that's where I have most of the connections. But we have now started going further deeper into the country. So we started in a place called Davao, which is where my first virtual assistant came from, the second one from the same place. And now we have connections in Manila and Cebu as well. So that's just organically happened. I was recently in Vienna and met a friend who told me that he had connections in the Philippines and that they would love to get some work and whether I could hook them up as well. So we've started expanding in the Philippines now as well.
Wow, because when I started, Dave, my virtual assistants were in the Ukraine, right? And when they called me up and told me they were homeless, I sent them money because I didn't understand what they were telling me. So now I can't get anybody in the Ukraine anymore. But then I got the Philippines, and I'm also I get my marketing people out of the southern states of the United States because they're really good, but they're a lot cheaper than Chicago. So that's great. So you've got this team. You've kind of got these team. Have you ever been to the Philippines?
I am yet to go to the Philippines. I do actually have plans to go very, very soon. It was on my plans before I went to Europe, but unfortunately the Europe trip came first because unfortunately that was for a funeral. But otherwise I would have definitely gone to the Philippines by this stage.
Wow. So
How are you marketing?
So let me ask you something.
Yeah, far away.
Thank you, David. That was my next question. You just jumped in there. Tell me about the marketing.
Yeah, tell us the marketing.
Well,
Yeah.
we haven't been around for that long yet, so we do have 5 to 6 clients already. We have 10 virtual assistants ready to go. We started off, obviously, by just people asking for the service, by noticing what was happening for me and seeing that that was something that they could greatly benefit from. So we've started through the very easy channels of social media. We've gone through Meetup, through all of the connections that I have. And we're only now starting to set up a broader range marketing campaign. We are starting to use the YouTube in order to be able to showcase what it is that we do and how it works and how it can benefit people. And we're also looking at what we can do through social media. And once we hit a certain level, then we're thinking of also starting to advertise on Facebook itself.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I noticed you've
Now,
already got a YouTube channel, eh? Yeah.
Now, listen, I've got a question. Are you using like Monster or Doctor or any of these software programs so that you can check on the performance of your people who are working for you?
Yes, so we started off by using Time Doctor, and then we started using Monday.com for management. And we realized that Monday.com can also be used as a CRM, can be used for automation, and can also be used for time tracking. So we're actually transitioning to Monday.com for everything, because that way we have a standard package that we can also offer the clients, so that the clients are able to manage their staff, they're able to track the time of their staff, but they're also able to run their CRM and automate the process of their reminder emails, of their contact with their customers, and run their sales processes through the one system. And if we specialize in that, then obviously we can offer a very good service, but we also have expertise and train the staff in how to use Time Doctor and other software, not just the one that we specialize in.
Right.
That's pretty good.
Any horror stories from, like as in, and how you've turned a horror story into a hero story?
David, you can't call it a horror story. You have to call it a learning experience.
That's right.
It's a learning.
Yes, I know, but
business podcast. It has to be a learning experience.
Well, that's true, but remember, Stephen King sells books for some reason, right?
Well, that's true. You're right.
Well, in that case, let me help both of you and say that I
experience is what you get. You don't get what you want.
Hang on. Yep, Menno. Yep.
So I'll bridge the gap between both of you and say that I've had some wonderful horror learnings that have helped me to improve and move forward.
Yeah.
So obviously there's always going to be miscommunications. There are going to be times when you think that your virtual assistant might not be doing what they're supposed to be, and then you ask about it, and then they get a little bit offended because they were actually doing what they were supposed to do. So yes, I've gone through the trials and tribulations, and I've now taken all of that and turned it into a really amazing training. Some virtual assistant agencies, they will get their virtual assistants to either not be trained at all and say that they have been trained, or they will say that they have been trained and they just get them to watch YouTube videos. But our company doesn't actually specialize necessarily in the skills that the virtual assistant has, because most skills can be learned, transferred, they're quite easy. What we really want to focus on is the mindset and attitude of the virtual assistant. Are they going to be open-minded to share their opinion? Are they going to be able to work towards reducing misunderstandings? Are they going to be able to work and understand what the difference is between how a business owner thinks as opposed to how a virtual assistant is going to think, so that we're reducing any kinds of conflicts, any kinds of misunderstandings, any kind of issues that might arise, because we want to guarantee that the client is going to be happy with the virtual assistant is going to be happy with the client. We can work on the training throughout the time that they're with the client, but if there is any kind of conflict, then you're going to be churning through virtual assistants, and we don't want that. We want to be a long-term commitment. We want everybody to be happy and want them to stay together for a long time, because that's when you start getting the synergy of somebody who understands your business and can actually work at maximum efficiency, which is why we're called ultimate efficiency, because we want them at ultimate efficiency so that you are getting the most bang for your buck for your business.
Right. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. And
So
what's
I
your
know what
insight?
everybody's
Yeah, go on.
what. Well, everybody's wanting to ask the question right now who's watching this. What does a virtual assistant cost?
So what does a virtual assistant cost? So our virtual assistants cost $15 an hour. We don't necessarily charge an upfront fee. It depends on how many hours you're going to be booking or how long the contract is. So the price will be higher or lower depending on that. But let's say on average about $15. For that, we're going to make sure that they are highly trained, that we are going to continue training them. So we don't just train them and then good luck with them. So if new technology comes out, we'll retrain them. We'll keep them up to date with everything that's current and important with regards to that. At the moment, we're working on helping them to use artificial intelligence to automate the creation of content. So we've got a couple of things that are possible there, where information is scraped from the internet and is then repurposed. It then still needs to be edited, but it actually gives you content automated so that the virtual assistants don't even spend that much time on it. And I think this is another really important aspect.
AI or something like that, maybe? Yeah.
Correct, yes.
Uh-huh.
So even if you're reducing your cost, so if in Australia you're paying $30 to $40 for the same staff, you're paying $15 an hour, will then also help you to reduce the number of hours that they're working on menial tasks so that they can even be working on tasks that are going to grow the business in that sense.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So that you do a stretch further rather than here's a virtual assistant, good luck with that. Let's see what else we can do to stretch that dollar even further, even though it's less than you would be paying for somebody else. And to be very honest, Filipinos, I find, when I've interviewed them as virtual assistants, I am amazed. I've interviewed Australians. I've interviewed people in Vienna and in the Netherlands.
Yeah.
And I would put my money on a Filipino any day. They are willing to work a little bit harder. They will create even better spreadsheets. They will analyze the data. They are willing to really put in a lot of time and effort to outperform where possible because they really want the jobs. They really want to look after their families. They want to look after their communities, and they really care about your business.
Do any of these people do like contact work, like telephone type, follow-up type work? Because I've heard people say that that's an area that is of high interest as well out there. Is that the sort of thing they do? Or?
Absolutely. So they can do lead generation through cold calling, through sales calls, through anything that can be done virtually, they'd be able to do.
Oh, okay. And is
there any, at home might be a little bit more challenging.
Is there any personal growth you've experienced, Menno, since you've taken on virtual assistant? I mean, is there anything that's changed your outlook on the world?
So I'm a big believer that everything should change your outlook on the world. Every interaction, every moment is going to offer you something. There is a learning experience in everything that we do. And I love expanding myself to experience new things every day. So I will brush my teeth with my left hand, or I'll do all sorts of different things. But definitely with regards to virtual assistants, if you're a business owner and you've never worked with staff before, it's going to teach you how to delegate and work with staff. If you've worked with staff before, but you've never worked with anybody virtually, it's going to teach you how to work with somebody when there is a time difference, when there is a distance. There are still new and exciting things to learn, and it's going to expand the skills of a business owner by working with somebody in a slightly different way, even if they've had experience working with somebody.
Yeah, because the biggest thing that you see on the news, in the business news, say over the last year, is all of these business managers saying, I can't handle people working from home. I want them back in the office. Now, is that because they can't handle somebody working virtually, even if it's only just a few suburbs away? And, what would you say to those people?
So one of my customers at my cafe were the two boys who ran and owned Atlassian. And they're the company that is about allowing their staff to stay virtual and working from home. I think that there is a limiting belief around the fact that people need to be in offices. The city is as busy as it's ever been. Everything is back to normal in the city. I don't think that people need to be cajoled back into the office. Not to mention the fact that if you're a believer in climate change, getting people back in cars and sending them back into the office is not necessarily a good idea for that. Whether you believe in that or not, that's another story. But I don't think that the world needs to stay stationary. AI is showing us that the world is changing. So if that is the case, the bosses of the world, the managers of the world need to start being open to the change that is coming. And I think that they're just holding on for dear life because they're afraid of what change is going to mean, how it's going to affect their ability to manage somebody, how it's going to affect their ability to generate funds for the business. It's going to just affect them in many different ways. And people are just afraid of that.
So you're saying they're a bunch of wimps, right?
Yes.
What do you think?
Let me ask you something. Well, when do you see the growth? Where do you see in this industry that you're now in, where do you see the growth?
I see the growth in more and more people starting to understand the principle of minimizing costs wherever possible and finding the best people to do things.
Yeah.
The old ways are all dying. The world is changing. AI is coming into the picture. If you are serious about looking for the best staff, why would you limit yourself to just one geographical location? We have a whole world, and I think this is a very important geopolitical thing as well, because the world is also changing in the sense that old alliances are breaking down. Certain countries are not trading with each other as much anymore. There are supply chain issues. We've gone from a globalization of the world to a reduction in globalization. And we need to go back to that globalization because that's what's going to promote peace. That's what's going to promote growth. That's what's going to make everybody more prosperous. And if we're going to start constricting that, then that's going to be a challenge. So if businesses continue down this trend of expanding and looking further out afield, then they're going, and this comes back to me when I was 15 as an exchange student. I went to Japan as an exchange student, and we were told that this exchange program was to promote peace. Because if you, as a 15-year-old, 16-year-old child, travel to another country, you see what that country is capable of, and you don't see them as a threat. You see it as something different. You see it as something that you can learn from. And so I think that the world needs to move in that trajectory as well. We need to expand our beliefs around what we can do with regards to our staff, what we can do with regards to the technology, what we can do with regards to every aspect of our business to go further out the field, because some people are worried that people are taking away the jobs from people in Australia. They're not taking away jobs from people in Australia. If somebody else is willing to work a little bit harder, then that should be a motivation to the people that are not putting in their full effort in order to be able to then compete with somebody who is willing to do that. So we need to
productivity there and to match or exceed productivity. What did you think about that, Rick, when you were running an office? How does Menno's experience compare to you on that one from way back?
There's one thing I've learned, and I found this when I was recently living in Portugal doing transactions of business in America, and we did it all remote. And if there's one thing I know is you always employ on attitude, because you can always teach skills. You can't teach attitude. And when I was employing my staff in the US, which I never met any of them, I used to put the ad in, and then when they answered the application, I'd give them exercise.
You're fading out, Rick.
I'm fading out.
You're back again now.
You lost your ad.
I'm back.
Give them exercise.
Yeah, because 15% will do the exercises and 85% won't. But the 15% that do the exercises are the ones who got the right attitude. I had a sales manager. I've never met her to this day in North Carolina. I'm sure she's a nice girl, but what a great attitude, because she went through all the tests, and I actually never got to speak to her, and then it was only on Zoom after she had employed herself. So I decide that term means, when they say self-employed means you employ yourself.
Yeah.
But it's all about attitude. Companies don't get this. I think they spend too much time interviewing people, then finding they've got people with bad attitude, when if you get the people to employ themselves, then that will wipe out the people with a bad attitude, and you'll only get the ones that are good.
And look, I suppose the reason why I'm still in touch with you, Rick, is done some SEO work for you and ads work for you way back 22 years ago, and we're still in contact after all this time. So, and I was working virtually.
The ads must
virtually
work
for
so
you.
well because you're able to find me.
Yes.
That's right.
Yeah.
It was all good fun. It was all good fun.
Yeah. So I
And,
see where you're going with the business, and
Yeah.
and I one of the things I did do was interesting. I had 14 staff and an overhead of about $4 million, right? And when I was able to take on board some of what Menno you talk about today, I was able to add $1 million to my bottom line and get rid of wasted procedures, people, operations, only because no one stopped long enough to ask somebody what they were actually doing. And at one stage, I had a girl getting $84,000 a year. I said, "What do you do?" She said, "Answer the phone." I said, "But the phone never rings." And she said, "I know, I've got the best job." So
Be
the
careful
great
who you
part
say
about
that
the outsourcing is so great because you don't get a lot of what I call waste in that people's hour. So people go, $15 might be expensive. No, it's not. It's cheap because when you pay someone 80 grand or a full-time wage, there's a lot of wasted time. Do you understand?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I must admit, I'm very selfish, but the one thing I used to always do, and I like about virtual workers, I never have to hear about the boyfriend problems when they first come to work for the first hour that I have to sort out before anybody feels good enough to go and actually do anything, right? So Monday morning was a dread, especially if some girl got left in a bar on Saturday night at 7:30. So the thing is, you bypass all that with virtual workers, right?
Yeah, and if they didn't get their cup of coffee right or at 10 a.m., you don't have to hear, there was a 20-minute queue at the coffee lounge across the street.
About the traffic, right? The relationship issues, all that stuff. Yeah, I get it. And that's why I like virtual people, because you just get you're paying a price, but it's all me. If you're paying $15 for 3 hours, there's 3 hours of me. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's true. You don't get that in the office. You get all of the other stuff. Yeah.
Get all the other stuff, all the people issues. The other thing is that most people don't realize, being someone who's owned a company, when you're managing staff, 70% of your time goes into the management of others. So you only retain 30% of your own production. If you can outsource and do what you're talking about, right? People don't understand. You get that, you buy that 70% of your time back because you just package those jobs. They're outsourced, they're gone, but I've brought back my 70%. Which is normally solving problems like why is there no toilet paper in the girls' toilet, right? Julie?
What do you say to that, Menno?
No, absolutely. And it is so important because my girls work very, very independently now. And I don't have to manage them very much because they know what they need to be doing. And the longer you have somebody, the more that they can then do their job. And the less time you're spending managing them, which is also really important. But you can also leverage their actual time in the sense that I have one of my virtual assistants who trades for me. So I trade foreign exchange.
Okay. Wow.
And I have a spreadsheet that gets sent across to her. And it will not show her what the actual processes are, but she is then told what actions to take, and she will then trade. It costs me about $40 a day. And so if I make $100, the cost is still $40. But if I make $500 for the day, then my cost is still only $40. And so depending on whether the market is up or down, my profitability is exponential in comparison to the cost, because the cost will change.
Yeah. Is this buying stocks and shares or gold?
So this is gold.
Oh, okay. That's right. Yeah, because that's your hot
gold,
topic.
yes.
Yeah. Which is very hot at the moment, I've seen. Silver is too. Yes. No, that's really good. Well, any parting comments? What you would like to say, Rick and Menno?
Well, one thing that's funny, one of the very first things you said to me, and I didn't want to interrupt you, was like when you're at college or somewhere and you're reading the Rich Dad book, right? And it reminds me of a funny story, because I know you like stories, Dave. When I was in Arlington, Texas, it was about 110 degrees, and I'm sitting outside a coffee shop, and Robert turns up in a suit, because I knew Robert when he first did Rich Dad, yeah. And, and so far he had sold 20 copies of his book. And he sat down. I said, Robert, you're in a three-piece suit. What are you doing? He said, well, I'm about to talk to these 25 people inside the coffee shop, because he's hired a little section of the coffee shop, and he was hoping to sell another 10 more copies of the book. And I remember sitting outside talking to another guy about property outside while Robert was trying to get to 30 copies of the Rich Dad, hoping he could sell another 10 copies. I mean, who would have known, right?
Exactly. Who would have known? Now, that's a good origin story.
I should have got a signed copy then.
Absolutely.
Who knows? This podcast will sell more copies than Rick was there at the beginning. What's your thoughts, Menno? Because you're the cash flow guy.
So I've met Robert a few times as well. And yes, it's quite a story where he's come from and what he's been able to do. But I think the lessons from the book are the most important things that people need to take away. And the important lessons are that you need to make sure that if you fall off the horse, that you get back up on the horse. You need to make sure that if there is a better way of doing something, that you look for it. Don't get stuck in the ways that that you are currently doing that. I was at a political lunch not long ago, and I actually had to talk to a couple of politicians and said, look, this country is getting to a point where we are doing way too many things in the same way. We only have two political parties, so they're looking at doing the same kind of thing rather than innovating. Business is all about looking for a better way of doing things, which is one of the reasons I decided to get virtual assistants, which is why most businesses should think about it and have a look at the options. And if you're already employing staff and you're paying full price, then, as Kerry Packer used to say, you need to have your head looked at, probably. But your own choice, your own decisions. But there are a lot of different things. If you look for smarter ways of doing things, you can achieve so much. And a lot of people get stuck in, this is how other people have done it. This is how it's always meant to be done. You need to keep looking, innovating, and looking for new and exciting ways of doing things, because that is how you get ahead of the game.
No, that sounds a good point to end on. And so once again, so thank you, Rick, and thank you, Menno, for being our special guest. We'll leave some links connecting to you. I think that's your link tree in the comments below, because you'll probably have a few new fans out of this, and they'd like to know a bit more about how all this works. And we have another great guest speaker coming up at the next podcast in a week from now. So there you go. So sign off, everyone. And
all right. See you next time. Bye.
See you next time.
Nice to meet you all, and thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure.